guys, welcome back to Strong Successful Male. So for today, I'm going to go over an email that was sent from a subscriber. This is my guy, sounds like he's in his mid-30s. He's from Poland, but he's working here in the USA right now. And he shares this story about events that happened like 15 years ago in his home country and his cousin Paul. The story is about Paul, how Paul was a very likable guy, a lot of great skills working with his hands in construction, plumbing, jack of all trades, did well for himself, and married the wrong girl and married too young. And like a lot of guys, made the mistake of not only marrying too young and marrying a beautiful woman, but also letting her run the relationship, milking for everything it's worth, and all that. However, you're going to see in all these mistakes, our guy definitely goes through a hard time, but then makes a comeback. He makes a comeback, and let's just say, fast forward to the future, he's doing great, and she's not so much. And that'll be a good one to go over here, guys, once again to show you how the stories I go over here aren't just for the United States, okay? These are stories that come in from brothers all over the world. And they, whether they're in Poland, or the UK, or South Africa, or here in the US, wherever, men deal with the same crap that they deal with over here, and these stories are great lessons of what to do in many occasions, what not to do. And so I'm covering this one here by yet another guy who makes the mistake of marrying too young. We've heard that song and dance before without knowing her too well. Being the provider ATM machine as opposed to being the leader, and how women can lose respect for you and take advantage if you don't stand up for yourself and the whole thing. But a guy can go through hell and claw his way back and make a major comeback and have the last laugh. So that's a very good one here, international story today. So I think it's a longer story, guys, but it's definitely worth your time. It says, Dear SSM, now that I've watched about half of your total library between the 3 channels, I decided it is time I contributed to a story as well. I hope that you can use it. The story is not mine, but belongs to my younger cousin Paul. The name changed, but his ex-wife's name really is Elvira, because Elvira can go choke on a phallus. Elvira, does she have giant boobs like Elvira? Paul and I grew up in a medium-sized city in Poland at the turn of the millennium, as the country was fully emerging from communism and its stifling insanity. Poland was finally becoming wealthier and opportunities seemed to be opening up daily. Traditional values mostly held sway, since the Western culture rot had not had a chance to invade yet. Still, you'll see that shit went down anyway. We grew up in a large extended family that was happily held together by a slew of grandparents, uncles, and moms. In our generational circle, all my cousins I consider Paul to be the best of us. He was a cheerful young man, honest, funny, and always actively looking to help others, just a pure joy of a man. Okay. Sounds like a great guy. A great guy that you would never want something bad to happen to or bad people to get into his life. Unfortunately, things like that doesn't always work that way. Okay, he was somewhat mediocre in school, but that's because he was absolutely fascinated by working with his hands and didn't have much patience for sitting in a classroom. Even when he was a teenager, if you needed plumbing work done, you called Paul. Your roof is leaking, get Paul over. The tractor's acting up, let Paul take a look. And you'll be laughing your ass off as Paul rattles off an endless series of jokes and funny stories while getting the tractor running like a Russian watch. Just like a Swiss watch, but faster. Well, that's impressive, being as young as he was. The entire family's mantra was, get on your grind. So Paul and I followed that advice. After graduating our version of high school, Paul went into general contracting, and word of mouth sent a lot of business his way. I think he was 20 years old when Paul and his dad started building Paul's eventual house. A common enough occurrence in a country where the government discouraged wealth creation for 70 years. So if you wanted something, you had to make it or build it on finesse and on your own. What a change for all you guys, huh? It was perfectly normal for a dozen cousins and uncles to spend weekends helping build a house for a family member. It took years sometimes, but it did get done. So Paul did contracting work, spent time building his future house, and kept dating his high school sweetheart, Elvira. He really didn't stand a chance with her. Elvira pursued him from the moment they met, and was relentless about it. In return, he was happy to be fondling somebody. While I was gladly taking part in the family's on-your-grind attitude, I don't subscribe to the family's old world tradition of marrying early. Good for you, bro. Light years ahead of so many people. I'm sure you are the odd man out, the black sheep of your family for that mindset. but you were light years ahead. That was the national and religious culture for who knows how long going back. I preferred to chat around while working on my purpose, but Paul was fully invested in the tradition. Our elders told us to work hard, get married, raise kids, support the family, and everything would be as good as it can be, barring another invasion from the east, or west, or north, or sometimes south. Still, Paul was all in and proposed to Elvira soon after graduation. Smack to Paul! I know, it was tradition, it was just what everybody did in your culture, you didn't know any better, but still I'm going to smack him anyway. They were 21 years old when they married. Oh, for goodness sake. It was a fantastic 2-day wedding and everyone had a great time, except for Uncle Chris, who got so drunk that he forgot his wife when he decided to go home to sleep it off. Apparently, she was used to it, but he suffered for a few weeks later. Anyway, back to Paul and Elvira. As is also tradition, they lived with Elvira's parents while Paul worked on his business and on their future house. Outside the West, it is quite normal to live with your parents or in-laws, as getting your own house is either very difficult or exceedingly expensive or sometimes just impossible. Well, that sounds like the US of A right now. I'm sorry to say for a lot of young guys out there, but don't give up, guys. Interest rates will come down soon, actually, amongst many other things, so keep on the grind. Paul was the same joyful guy we grew up with. He loved being married and looked forward to taking care of his wife and future children. He was cheerfully taking part in the old way of getting married and staying married, hopefully happily. Well, Paul sounds like a great guy, but Paul also sounds like he's going to be the big, great provider. And there's nothing wrong being a provider, but also you have to be a guy a woman respects. Otherwise, they just see you as a provider, an ATM. And she obviously knew Paul was going to be able to provide well, given that he could do plumbing and roofing and all these other things. There was a good future with Paul. She was smart enough to set her sights on him. I mean, it's not rocket science. And if she's a good-looking chick, hey, he thinks he wins. He got along well with his in-laws, but they were actually part of the troubles when those troubles started. With 2 generations of adults living under one roof, conflicts were bound to occur. Well, naturally. Elvira, used to listening to her parents, never made a good transition into married life. If there was a difference of opinion, she would get her parents involved, instead of listening to what Paul had to say. No. I don't care what your culture is. Once a woman gets married, the number one guy in her life is her husband. Period. Her mom would, of course, gladly share her opinions, and Elvira would more often than not use her parents to sway Paul toward her way. Really, her mother's way of thinking. And Paul was too nice and too young and too inexperienced to know any better. Yeah, the old stereotype about mother-in-laws, huh? Paul, being the dutiful husband, always remained calm and cheerful. He used diplomacy, he compromised, and he tried to keep his wife happy. Yeah, good luck with that. Meaning that often he would back down from Elvira's opinions and wants, especially since he was outnumbered 3-1. Over the next few years, they strained some of his good-humored approach to life. Well, smack to Paul. Remember, guys, when you stop being a leader and you start following your wife around, bad things are going to happen quite quickly. She's going to lose respect for you. And you know what happens in all these stories when a woman loses respect for her guy? Oftentimes there's bullshit, there's shit tests, even bigger and bigger shit tests if he doesn't stand up for himself and resume the role he hopefully once had as a leader. But this guy's too inexperienced and doesn't know any better. And sure, I can imagine being under the in-laws' roof and having 3 against 1. Sure, it can be tough. But you can't back down, guys. You can't be a pushover. There's one thing I think in relationships, if she's being loving and loyal and supportive, all these positive qualities, then you treat her accordingly. But if it's one-sided, her way or the highway, then, you don't act that way. And it's also, frankly, time to get out. But he married her too quickly. As a side note, I'm convinced this is the reason for the popularity of mother-in-law jokes and Polish humor. No matter how much you might like and respect each other first, if you're living together for years with the in-laws, conflicts will occur. The mutual admiration is strained more and more, and eventually you lose respect for your in-laws. Of course, that's not going to happen with spending too much time with anybody. Especially since the older and wiser mother-in-law always seems to have an opinion on everything you do. I'm sure you guys that are married know about the mother-in-laws, huh? They finally piss you off enough that you completely get sick of them. Anyway, outside of their shared home, Paul was doing great in business, staying on his grind. Word of mouth was so strong that he started an interior remodeling company and expanded. Money was coming in, which made building his own home go faster. This is why Elvira got with him, because she knew she's going to be provided for. Still, even once the home was complete and they moved out on their own, the in-laws would visit often and bring their own words of wisdom with them. Yeah, the words of wisdom. I always find it funny when people that are older try to give the words of wisdom to the young folk, and these older folks, whoever they may be, have not demonstrated in their own lives to following their own advice. Rules for thee, not for me, that type of thing, you know? It's like you have people who are terrible with money, that piss away every dollar that comes in, lecturing people to save their money and all that. Meanwhile, they continue to do the bad habits and make them broke. Like, you're going to fucking lecture me about this, and this, or investing, and you don't have a pot to piss in, really, or other things. They're probably jealous of him. It made him feel better to, like, talk down to him. Elvira still sided with her parents rather than with Paul. And Paul put up with the fact that the wisdom would always support whatever Elvira wanted. Smack to Paul. P-whip Paul. They tried for kids, but Elvira had some medical issues which made pregnancy difficult. They suffered through several miscarriages. After each one, she turned a bit more and more bitter and seemed to blame Paul. Well, it's possible he's got bad sperm, but also, who knows, other things can happen. But blaming him, of course you're going to blame him. Simultaneously, he fully supported her. The blame seemed to also spill onto our side of the family, and a lot of our family was slowly frozen out of family holidays, get-togethers, etc. Paul became a bit more isolated and a bit more surrounded by his wife's side of the family. Yeah, she's a fucking narcissist. That's what they do. See, this is in Poland. It's no different than here in the USA. The gal does everything she can to put a wedge between the guy's friends and family. Everything brings him joy, wear him down, that type of thing. Finally, after years of trying, they got pregnant again. Smack! I mean, they got pregnant. She got pregnant. He says, psych, she got pregnant. Okay. You saved yourself there. After the previous miscarriages, they nervously paid attention to nutrition, doctor's advice, and finally succeeded. Paul now had a son. Some folks in the family thought this would reverse Elvira's attitude of taking Paul for granted, but were mistaken. Of course, because just no matter how much shit she throws at him, he just takes it. She has no respect for him. She's an asshole, we can all agree here, but Paul is not helping himself. No matter what he did, she came to expect it as her rightful due and disdained his efforts. At that time, Poland had a love affair with Western cars, and they were finally becoming available in the market. Elvira wanted a BMW 3 Series station wagon. She got her station wagon. I don't recall her showing much gratitude, and Paul seemed to think, like a lot of our peers and predecessors did, that he should provide and be happy that he's providing. Guys, I got no problem with being a good provider for your good family, but you also have to be the leader. You're running the relationship, not her, especially someone who behaves like this. She's like a fucking petulant child. No matter what, she always wants more. Western clothes, Elvira got them, and Paul would get nagged about letting her buy more immediately. When she wanted an upgrade of the kitchen in their brand new house, he remodeled the kitchen after work and on weekends. Well, that happens everywhere. She could be a cool wife, actually a good wife, and still, women get bored, they want to upgrade shit in the house. That happens all the time. Whatever she wanted, he provided. She became more distant and more disrespectful to him by association, to his parents and extended family. Her mom's word was still law, and Paul's opinions were often simply discarded. That famous cheerful smile on Paul's face became more strained with each year. Bro, why were you coming in there and smacking the shit out of Paul and giving him some well-needed advice? Were you and Paul becoming distant? Could you not stand to be around him because of her? I mean, seriously, I gotta wonder this. I was there when Paul finally cracked. Elvira kept pestering him to build a nice vegetable garden, so he put in a couple weeks' work outside, turning unused land into a beautiful oasis. On that particular summer day, I stopped by with some beer and we got to work. Hell, Paul's now 3-year-old son even helped. After a day of digging out rocks and roots, moving dirt, and setting some fencing, the beer sounded awfully good. So we headed into the house to grab a couple bottles and found Elvira, as usual, entertaining her parents. Fucking freeloaders. Why isn't Paul telling them to get the fuck out of his house? When we walked into the house, she started berating Paul for bringing dirt into the freshly cleaned foyer. She hadn't come out to help Paul. She certainly hadn't brought us to something to eat or brought out a bottle of that glorious beer. But she had time to rip him a new one for daring to spill her vegetable garden dirt onto the floors of his house. Guys, you act like a bitch, they're going to treat you like a bitch. It was not a particularly dramatic moment, really, but it seemed to be the straw that broke Paul's back. His eyes took on a cold, dark look I'd never seen before, and Paul icily replied, "From now on, you can get dirty. I'm done with the garden since I don't accept payment in fuck yous." Then he looked at his in-laws and an even colder voice said, "Glad you came to visit. Sorry to hear that you're leaving already." They were probably frozen, like, what? That seemed to shut everybody up. The in-laws actually left without their usual advice or blabbering. Imagine that. A man stands up for himself and starts laying down the law. Paul then went back out to the garden, and I followed, trying not to laugh my ass off, until I saw his face. Paul looked like he was ready to tear someone apart. He thanked me for my work and then said he'll do the rest himself. No. After that shit, nope. Bitch, you want a fucking flower garden or whatever vegetable garden, you can get your ass out here and do it yourself. I'm done. I'm going to sit here on my chair and enjoy my beer, the entire six-pack of the beer, because you've driven me to drink. And I'll watch you on all four fucking dig and dig out roots and move rocks and whatever the hell you do to build a fucking garden, because I have no idea. That's what I'm going to watch you do. He grabbed a pickaxe and began demolition of the garden we've been building. Aha! I stayed and helped, in silence, and what took 2 weeks to create was completely torn apart in mere hours. I know whose back I have, and if he wanted to do some emotional venting using sharp tools, then damn it, he had my support. Ruined the whole garden. I like to say this was the moment that Paul turned things around and gained the leadership position in his home. But he'd been a happy provider for too long and started learning too late. Elvira's disdain had been unchecked for too long as well, and her opinion of him as the nice, smiling, supportive husband had solidified. Things did not improve, but instead fell apart. He was probably a couple years too late, actually, to counter her disrespect, but he started trying. So yeah, he's done, and he's now getting his man card back, but it's too late. He'd been acting like a bitch so long, there ain't no change in her mind. She's so used to... She knows I can just wear this guy down eventually. As Paul learned to stop being a provider and an ATM and start being an actual strong husband, their disagreements increased in frequency. It didn't occur to him yet to walk away, because both because their cultural tradition against it was strong, because there was a young kid in the house. Now, normally, guys, if this was somebody in the USA, I would have been like, divorce the bitch a long time ago in this video. But because this is another country and a different culture and all that, I know things are a little different. Yes, divorce happens, but, you know, with various cultures and religions, things can be a little more challenging. But yes, ditch the bitch. During one of their arguments, Elvira let slip that she had made a friend. This friend treated her well, that she bragged. Better than Paul ever had, according to her. This is why she treats Paul like shit, because he treats her like the fucking queen. And she whipped out the divorce card. He wasn't ready for it and was just stunned, just as he finally started changing his approach to marital relations. And let me guess, guys, how do you think the divorce is going to go for him? And within a couple weeks, he was served actual divorce papers. Elvira was pretty discreet with her friend, so Paul never had any proof of infidelity that could be reliably used in court to affect some of the divorce outcome. Well, maybe she was discreet, but maybe you, bro, or other family members should have been following her around at night and taking pictures or whatever. Through my own series of adventures, promotions, and dealings, I was now working in England and would eventually settle in the financial capital of the world, Milwaukee. Milwaukee, huh? That's immaterial to the story, but it means I know the rest of Paul's story from long-distance talks with him, my cousins, and my yearly visits back home. In short, Paul was bent over and spanked in the divorce, albeit for different reasons than the United States. This is the thanks he gets. Good guy, great to her, patient to their family, giving, and all she and her asshole in-laws did was take, and now is getting hammered in divorce. Well, there's a silver lining here. He is still young. He's still in his 20s, and this guy is extremely resourceful and gifted with his skills. He's going to take a hit, but he can rebuild, just like all of us. I could be wrong on this, but I think the Polish divorce laws was still set in traditional thinking. The man provides and supports the family, thus he is financially responsible in the divorce. The woman raises the children, so she has the primary custody. Even though the reasoning was different, Paul's fate was the same as what you often talk about in your podcast. He might as well have divorced in California. She kept the house and was awarded majority custody of their son, and in child support and spousal support, and he basically got kicked out of his own life. After all that, guys, she gets the house. The house, I might add, that wasn't built by the local contractors, it was built by all of them, right? By family. She gets the house. Primary custody of his little boy. The alimony, the child support. Child support, okay, got to take care of the kid. And he's booed out of his house. Marriage sound good to you guys? Maybe it's a good idea. You spend years getting to know your girl before you think about, I know different culture, but still, amongst many other things. And not kissing her. This is the thanks he gets. But don't worry. He's going to be okay. I share these stories, guys, as warnings that you don't make the mistakes of these other guys. What kills me is that Elvira originally pursued him, was originally crazy about him, while he just looked forward to a quiet life with a wife and kids. A quiet life with a wife? Really? And yet she was the one who changed, cheated, and ended the marriage. Of course, as I'm sure you point out already, he allowed it all by being a provider rather than a leader. She chased after him early on because he was no doubt popular, and he was clearly, a guy like this was well liked, and she probably could see his potential early on as a great provider. That's probably why she chased after him. And then once they got together, he was that overall guy, everybody likes to be around, and provider, nice guy, and he stopped being, he let her lead. He behaved like a man in an American sitcom here. Look what happened to him. It's a damn shame, and she's an asshole, but he didn't help his situation. I'm being honest here. So Paul spent years paying her for the privilege of the divorce, but stayed on his grind. So the cost didn't completely ruin him. He slowly clawed his way back. I believe spousal support ended after 5 years, so that helped a bit with the recovery as well. Well, that's good. I mean, she still got the house and primary custody of the kid, which is terrible, but at least after 5 years, okay, this woman will obviously find another sucker, but at least after 5 years. And he said here, Paul immediately was back on his grind, and he wasn't like he was broke. See, guys, this all happened in his 20s. A man can claw his way back. Paul toughened up quickly after the divorce and would no longer put up with any disrespect from her, but it was a moot point for their dead marriage. But he made sure his son saw good co-parenting, rather than one parent trying to alienate the child from the other. Paul has not gotten remarried. Well, Paul, I guess, is now in his mid-30s, give or take. I'm sure he hasn't gotten remarried. And if Paul thinks about getting remarried, you got to smack him. He did get serious with a woman just once, a few years after the divorce, until his girlfriend suggested that they would be better off as a couple if Paul gave up custody of his son. Are you freaking kidding me here? Okay, stepmother from hell. Oh, we'd be better off if you could just, give up custody of your son. You don't need him. Fuck you, bitch. This is my boy. He immediately and figuratively drop-kicked her to Ukraine. Since then, I haven't heard of anything beyond a string of casual partners, which warms my heart, since as the black sheep of my family, my attitude on marriage is that the hump and dump suffice. Paul is pretty much off now, loves his hobbies, and actually gets to spend more time with his son than Elvira does. And I'll explain that in a minute. The son is a teenager now. The two of them have recently started a new hobby, motorcycle road trips across Europe. Dude, that's cool. It's not as suicidal of a hobby as it would be in the US of A. That's awesome, man. And let's close up with Elvira. What about Elvira? Her friend got rid of her after a year or so. She has been unsuccessfully trying to find a new husband ever since, with more desperation every year. Yeah, of course she's getting more desperate every year because her looks are fading every year. And guess what? After 5 years, the spousal support was gone, so she needed to find another sucker to provide for her because, God forbid, she does anything to provide for herself. Every few months, she'll change her Facebook profile picture to a new, sexier one. More makeup, more lip filler, more revealing outfits. I attached a photo of her last few profile pictures, which I sent to you in the story. I dare you to make the face she's making in all the photos as you read the story. No thanks. I'm not a dancing monkey, brother. I'm not going to mimic the pictures of this chick. And by the way, guys, he sent me the pictures of what she looks like, and I will say this. She's good looking. Even for her age, now in her mid-30s, she's good looking. But, so I'm sure back when this dude married her, she was fucking hot, smoking hot. You can see why he obviously, he did all those nice guy things, because he's thinking, beautiful woman, I got to do whatever I got to do to keep her. But I bet you this so-called friend of hers that dumped her probably didn't do any of that. See, guys, these stories are all the same. Doesn't make a difference where you are in the world. He says, try to get the same head angle and same duck lips going. No, I will not do that. No matter what you do, you won't look as stupid and desperate as she does. By the way, the reason Paul now has more time with his son is that she works 2 jobs so she can pay for the house maintenance and the escalating attempts to bring back her youthful looks, and nobody's falling for it. Ha ha ha. Good. She should be working a couple jobs. What about the in-laws? What are they doing here? Some of the stories you read here are clear wins. This one is not. It's just a story of a guy recovering from mistakes and wounds, which unfortunately were at least partially self-inflicted. While it's not a win for him, Paul really is recovering, enjoying his life and time with his son. His story is a warning about red flags, although it's much easier to see them after the fact, and a lot more difficult to separate them as you're just going through them on your daily business of building wealth and living family life. I think that's what did Paul in. He saw difficulties in his marriage, but did not recognize them as the dangerous events they actually were. Hopefully this story is also a warning that even in traditional societies, human nature can be ugly, but we can either prevent or overcome that ugliness if we're strong enough. Amen. Or if we learn from others' mistakes. Better learn from somebody else's mistakes than have to go through all the pain and agony and all that, which could be lasting for years or a lifetime. So there you go. Yeah, Paul made his mistakes. He was a young guy, and he did what everybody told him to do. And look what happens when you do what everybody tells you to do, but you don't want to do yourself. Let that sink in, gentlemen. But anyhow, good for Paul for staying strong, weathering the storm. Now he's single, doing what he wants. He obviously is doing well financially, has a great relationship with his son. This is the fall and rise of Paul. Meanwhile, it's the permanent fall and descent to hell for Elvira. So, the hell with her. So there you go, guys. Again, proving a guy can fuck up, make a lot of mistakes, but learn and make a comeback and do great. And the bimbo that did him wrong, not so great. So for any of you guys out there that are struggling right now, or maybe you're in a bad marriage and you just want to get the hell out, but you think, I just can't make it, there's another example of a guy that did it. Yeah, it's going to be hard for a while, but you know what? There's a point where it's better literally living under a bridge or in your car, and before you smart ass to say, like SSM lives in his car, no, I don't live in my fucking car, than having to put up with all that shit. And you're going to be okay. It may take a while, but you're going to be okay. And these stories prove that. All right, guys, that's it for today. Be sure to comment down below. Let me know what you think about this. And be sure to like the video, share with your friends, and subscribe. I'll catch you next time.